السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. ليلة جميلة بنقضيها مع حضراتكم بتعيد الابتسامات لوجوه الشعب المصري، التفاؤل بالمستقبل هنا في مصر. إن شاء الله يكون هذا التفاؤل مصحوب بالنفحات المباركة لهذه الأيام، إنها تودينا إلى المكان اللي بيصبو ليه الشعب المصري. الخلافات اللي موجودة بيننا وبين بعض كأبناء لهذا الشعب على كل حاجة، احنا الحقيقة بنختلف على كل حاجة، على أصغر الأمور قبل الأمور الكبيرة. أعتقد أننا محتاجين أننا نتجاوز هذه الخلافات بشكل أو بآخر، ما نصطنعش المزيد من الخلافات أو ناخد بالنا أن الخلافات بتندس بينا على أبسط بسائط الأمور. العالم ينظر إلى مصر الآن. مصر هتعمل إيه؟ مصر هتتصرف إزاي في ثورتها؟ مصر هتتصرف إزاي مع حكومتها الجديدة، مع رئيسها الجديد، مع دستورها الجديد، مع خريطة الطريق اللي هي بتحطها؟ بيشوفونا احنا كمواطنين بنتعامل إزاي في رصد للرأي العام المصري، سواء اللي موجود في وسائل الإعلام أو الموجود على مواقع التواصل الاجتماعي أو اللي موجود في الصحف. عفوا. يعني كان في مقال نشر في المصري اليوم الحقيقة، والناس احتجت على هذا المقال اللي بيقارن بين تجربة البرازيل والتجربة اللي المفروض تتبعها مصر مع أطفال الشوارع. الحقيقة أحيي المصري اليوم إن هو استجاب لرد الفعل اللي كان موجود من المثقفين ومن الكتاب ومن رجل الشارع العادي تجاه هذا المقال اللي هم استشعروا ان هو اساء بشدة لإنسانية المصريين، فسحبوا هذا المقال من على الموقع. الاستجابة من جانب وسائل الإعلام سواء التلفزيونية الإذاعية أو الصحافة أو المواقع الإلكترونية لنبض الشارع جزء مهم جدا. عملية النقد الذاتي بيننا احنا كإعلاميين لنفسنا، مش على طبعا يعني مش هينفع نطلع على القنواتنا التلفزيونية وننتقد بعض على الأداء الإعلامي، ولكن لازم نعمل ده مع نفسنا وبين نفسنا، نراجع نفسنا طول الوقت اننا بنخطئ ولا بد اننا نخرج من حدود هذه الخطايا. هاخدكم ومجموعة من اللقاءات هنقسمها الحقيقة لأنها أخذت يعني كانت مجموعة لقاءات حوالي 8 لقاءات أجرتها مع أعضاء مجلس عموم ولوردات بريطاني وجزء من الوفد المصري أيضا اللي كان مصاحب لهذا الوفد اللي زار مصر والتقى بالرئيس والمسؤولين في مصر. اللقاءات تمت سواء اللقاءات التلفزيونية اللي عملتها أو لقاءات المسؤولين مع البريطانيين بتقول إن في بداية جديدة. لو حضراتكم تتذكروا كنت التقيت برئيس هذا الوفد في بريطانيا نفسه، هو ده من اللقاءات اللي هنذاعها على حضراتكم بكرة في القاهرة 360، ولكن النهاردة مجموعة من يعني أعضاء مجلس العموم واللوردات بيتكلموا بعد ما جم مصر وشافوا وبعد ما تمت الانتخابات الرئاسية وبعد ما قعدوا واستمعوا إلى الرئيس في موضوعات مختلفة، منهم اللي بيتكلم فقط أو بشكل أكبر عن الاقتصاد، منهم اللي بيتكلم فقط أو بشكل أكبر عن السياسة، ومنهم اللي بيتكلم فقط أو بشكل أكبر عن الأمن ومواجهة الإرهاب. تعالوا نشوف، أسيبكم مع هذه اللقاءات. الدعوة اللي وجهت لمجموعة من البرلمانيين البريطانيين من أصدقاء مصر أو ال APPG اللي هي مجموعة كل الأحزاب المؤيدة لمصر، واللي موجود منها 16 من أعضاء البرلمان سواء كانوا الهاوس اوف كومنز اللي هو مجلس العموم أو الهاوس اوف لوردز اللي هو مجلس اللوردات، وموجودين والتقوا زي ما حضراتكم أكيد عارفين بالرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي، والتقوا بوزير الدفاع ووزير الخارجية ومجموعة من المسؤولين. والنهاردة واحنا بنسجل معاهم عشان خاطر نعرض على حضراتكم انطباعاتهم عن هذه الزيارات، بيتم الإعداد فعلا للقاء موسع وكبير بدعوة من الجامعة البريطانية في القاهرة ان هم يكونوا موجودين في مأدبة عشاء بيشاركوا فيها مع عدد كبير من رجال السياسة والثقافة والوزراء الحاليين والسابقين، ان هم يكونوا موجودين معهم عشان يحتكوا بيهم. خليني اقول ان حتى قبل ما نبتدي تسجيلنا مع الناس، الانطباعات كلها انطباعات ايجابية. اول لقاء ليا هيكون مع الاونربل أليستر بيرت، عضو البرلمان. أليستر بيرت هو الحقيقة كان وزير لشؤون الشرق الأوسط في الحكومة البريطانية لغاية سنة فاتت، فبالتالي هو على دراية باللي بيحصل في مصر. كان موجود في مصر في يوليو 2013 والنهاردة بيتواجد بعد مرور قرابة العام، فهنعرف منه انطباعاته ما بين يوليو 2013 ويونيو 2014 الدنيا شكلها عامل ازاي. The Honorable Alistair Burt, first of all, you're most welcome to Cairo.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to Cairo 360. You've been in Egypt for a couple of days right now, and you've met with the president, and you've met with a number of senior officials from Egypt. Tell me, what are your impressions?
I've been very interested to come back. I was last here in July 2013 as the minister in the United Kingdom responsible for the Middle East, the deputy to William Hague for Egypt. So I was very interested to come back so soon after the presidential elections and get a sense of mood. There's no doubt that the government here are very keen that those in the United Kingdom understand the process of what happened last year, the process of the roadmap and the determination to follow through with the presidential elections and the parliamentary elections, and are also very determined to demonstrate that it's becoming business as usual now in Cairo and in Egypt again. There is a return to security and stability, which is very important. But my sense is that the country and the government recognise that Egypt has been through an extraordinary time. We're not going back to where we were pre-January the 25th, and we're not going back to where we were during the last presidency. Something new is happening, and Egypt is keen to demonstrate that. And we have had a very interesting couple of days.
And did you feel that something new is happening? Did you feel it in terms of this is just diplomatic talk that was being said, or actually something on the ground is happening?
I don't think it is diplomatic talk. Of course, it is not unfamiliar that in circumstances such as those that have happened here, someone seen as a strong individual leading the military comes to power and says that he's going to govern in a particular way and lead the country to democracy. People all over the world have heard this in similar circumstances before. Sometimes it happens, more often it doesn't. The question is, how determined is Egypt to see the roadmap through and go to democracy? And I think from our conversation with the President and what the President has been prepared to say publicly about a number of matters, there seems to be determination to make sure that on this occasion and for this country, there is a determination to see a return to democracy and for stability to lead to that opportunity. I take as a particular example what the President has done personally in relation to women. The incident in Tahrir Square, which followed on a succession of incidents in the past and a general attitude of men towards women, which is seen as unacceptable now in Egypt. Certainly. That the President should go and see the victim, that he should declare that publicly, he should talk about a change to the law on sexual harassment. This would not have happened, I think, recently. And if that is a determination of him to understand where the country feels about something and do something about it, I think we felt that bode well for the future.
So you were responsible within the British government about the Middle East and all the contacts in the Middle East till July 2013.
Yeah.
And accordingly, you're very familiar with not only Egypt, but you're familiar with the entire region. How do you see those developments that are happening around us, like with Iraq, with Libya, and so on, that is going to affect the entire Middle East?
I think the events of the last 3.5, 4 years have been genuinely extraordinary. I think the first thing we learned in the Foreign Office was that although there were similarities in the reasons that had caused outbreaks of concern from the people, and those similarities would be corruption, poor economies not delivering to a rising young population, not delivering the living standards that were necessary, a worry about the political structures not giving people opportunities. Having said there were similarities, each state was very different. Each state is very different. Tunisia is different to Libya, different to Egypt, different to Syria. And the way we have seen all these events play out has been different. Clearly now there are significant worries around the region. The tragedy of Syria, the day-to-day slaughter of people, with now a three-cornered fight. The regime, the moderate opposition that in the first place simply asked for reform and was met with violence and torture by the Assad government, and now the jihadi extremists who threaten everyone. It's very difficult to see an end to that conflict. That has now leached over the border into Iraq. Syria, Iraq, that border, I suspect in places no longer exists. And now a threat to Iraq. And Iraq has had its own problems with a prime minister unable to govern in an inclusive manner, who had alienated the Sunni community. And now there is a terrible price being paid with the fracture, with only the Kurdish region being stable and secure. There are threats all around the area. Well. And Libya, the issue there in Libya, of course, action was taken to prevent Gaddafi from massacring people in Benghazi. And there was support and help given to the Libyans after. I've heard the argument that people walked away. No one walked away from Libya. But what was going to happen was not what happened in Iraq, the putting in of Western troops on the ground after the Libyan people had expelled Gaddafi. Training and support was given in Libya, but there's nothing there. There was no structure in Libya. Libya was not like Egypt after January the 25th. It was not like Tunisia after the expulsion of Ben Ali. In both Egypt and Tunisia, there was a state, there was a structure. After 40 years of Gaddafi, there was nothing. So you have the militias dependent on their own people, no central government, no central government in control.
But didn't the West know all this before they did what they did, before they helped in what they helped? Didn't they know that Libya stands alone as a country where chaos would just erupt and people would die and the Islamists will come in and the terrorists will be there and they're just across a few miles from Italy?
So what do you say to the West when we stand back and say, Gaddafi, sure, kill your people in Benghazi, recover your rule by violence, kill some more people in your prisons like you've done, and we'll just stand back? What would have been your reaction? But remember, it wasn't us that moved first, it was the Arab League. The Arab League moved first and said there must be action on Gaddafi. Then the UN followed. So this was not an issue for us.
The Arab League has asked for NATO's help. And
yes, but then I don't think, genuinely, I don't think anyone could have quite predicted what would have happened, and that 3 years on, the militias and others would not have resolved their issues. There are things that people from outside cannot control, in much the same way as Iraq, that Maliki should govern as he has, to divide his people rather than unite him. I'm not sure that is the responsibility of the West or anyone else. In Libya, there's only a certain amount of help that can be given. People have to find their own way through to things. Now in Egypt, of course, the situation has been different. You've been through a people's revolution twice. Once January the 25th, the second June the 30th, in circumstances which are clearer to understand now perhaps than at the time. So in each state, it's been different. But your question about the impact of these events all around the region, these are profound events of which we've probably only seen the first couple of pages of a book. But the greatest danger to it now is no doubt the extremist, warped ideology that now threatens any state that does not conform with the extremist view. That is a threat throughout the Sahel, in this area, and that is something new that has evolved from these events.
But that's precisely the point. The point is, if each country stands alone independently in its own circumstances, the only common denominator is the presence of Islamic extremists who are taking over many of these countries and are threatening to take over the rest of the countries of the Middle East.
I think that is a true comment. I think now there is a greater appreciation of the need for moderate states where the people have a say and a democratic say, and who want to see an end to this threat from violent extremism. I think now recognise that there is a much greater threat to all of them. Each has their own individual issues, but they are going to have to find a way to band together. And the principal responsibility will be, I think, firstly on them, because again, coming from outside, coming from the West, it will be easy for jihadis and extremists to say this is a Western intervention and recruit more people. This has to be a Muslim reaction to Muslim extremism. And then with that, perhaps, there is support available, because we must recognise the threat to all of us. But I think it has to be Muslim-led.
And you've met with the Minister of Defense.
Yeah.
And definitely, or maybe I'm predicting, that he's been seeking the help of all the world in this military confrontation with the extremists in Sinai, on the western border of Egypt with Libya. And the West is withholding weaponry, for example, like there is the US attitude, perhaps there is also a European attitude of holding the supply of weaponry. Is this going to change?
Well, firstly, it wouldn't be fair for me to reveal any conversation I've had with any of their excellencies during this visit. But the United Kingdom has always sought to make a distinction, as our law requires, between weaponry which could be used in internal issues of repression and weaponry that is needed to protect from an external threat. My understanding is that the United Kingdom has been able to distinguish the weaponry needed, as we had supplied before, to those who have been fighting terrorism in Sinai and continue to support Egyptian needs there. Now, I'm not in office at present, so I do not know.
Sure.
But I know that we sought, once we'd reviewed the circumstances following last year's events, we sought to continue to make that distinction. I certainly did, because we have to be prepared to support those who are fighting terrorism. We know that there is cooperation over the border in relation to this, and we know intelligence matters as well. That is a common threat to all of us. That is distinct from the way in which internal order needs to be kept, which needs to be done with a minimum of force, with civil policing, and I'm sure those processes to train and improve civil policing are going on.
Finally, a question. You were here in July 2013,
Yeah.
You're here in June 2014, you're going back home, inshallah. And what is the first thing that you're going to say, for example, to the media or to Parliament? The first thing that comes to your mind, what would it be about Egypt, about this visit?
The situation on the streets is palpably different to that which I witnessed in July 2013, as people would know. I came at a time when the polarization in Egyptian society was expressed by people on the streets. Now, I think the polarization in society is still there. There are still people who take a very strong view for or against the actions of the government. There is concern about how some of the political parties have been treated, but there is no doubt, there is an overwhelming sense of a desire to recover that stability. That is true. And going around the town, I spent the best part of an hour on my own today, walking through Cairo. And a year ago, I would not have been able to do that because of the situation on the street. So that has changed. And there is a mood of people wanting to see that in Egypt's case, a transference from stability to democracy will be achieved. The determination of the president, the foreign minister, who speaks extremely well, understands the outside world very well, their understanding of the need to keep to the roadmap, to demonstrate to the outside world that Egypt is on course, is very important. It is right, and I think it's only fair that friends come along who want to be interested in everything that's happened, who will draw attention to those things that worry, because that's what friends are there for. We have it in the United Kingdom, you have it here. But that the situation is different and better here than it was when I was last here is certainly a message I would go back with.
So on behalf of friends of yours, normal, regular Egyptian citizens, I thank you for being here in Cairo. I thank you for taking the stand of wanting to know what's happening in order to convey it back home. So I thank you, and I thank you for being on Cairo 360.
Thank you very much for the invitation. See you again.
The Honourable Alistair Burts, Member of Parliament, it's been a pleasure talking to him, and certainly will be a pleasure to hear about him when he goes back home.